Hi, it's Steph, and we're at Lowe's, and they've just received racks and racks of new perennials and annuals. There are also some new trees and shrubs, so let's go ahead and take a look at the late April inventory at Lowe's. If you're looking for a great perennial for a shady area that has this beautiful, large, silvery, heart-shaped foliage, Brunnera is a great option. Not only does it get these really pretty forget-me-not type blooms in early spring, once they're done blooming, this foliage gets a lot larger and it's really impactful in a shady spot. Check that out. Isn't that gorgeous? So $15.98 for these 1 gallon containers by Proven Winners. It does say that it is a part shade plant. I do find if they get too much sun that the leaves will crisp up. This is also a plant that likes moderate moisture, so a moist but well draining soil. At only 16 to 18 inches in height and needs 28-inch spacing. Hardy in zones 3 through 8 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So it blooms in mid-spring to late spring. But what I wanted to bring your attention to was at the bottom of the Proven Winners tags, it tells you plant pairings. So I like to offer suggestions of how plants look nicely paired together from my own experience in my garden. But if you're ever not sure, just look at that. Pair with Hosta, bleeding hearts, foam flower, coral bells, ferns, and sedge. All plants that like a part shade to shade location and that have varying textures and blooms, so they would contrast really nicely together. Another really pretty foliage accent plant for a shady spot is Hosta. Now, if you deal with deer, Hosta can be deer salad, but if you don't, they're a great option to light up a shady spot because they come in so many different colors and patterns. Shades of greens, creams, yellows, just some really great options. They also have larger foliage, smaller foliage, etc. Now, these here are the Halcyon plantain lily, and they look like they're going to have a blue tint to them. $5.48 in the Lowe's house brand container. They can take 1 to 3 hours of morning sun, but these really prefer more shade. They do bloom at some point in the summer. They will send up a bloom stalk that have these either purple or white bell-shaped blooms. The pollinators love them, but if you don't like them, you can follow it down and cut it at the base of the plant. On the top of the rack here, they have a blooming shade plant. This is Pulmonaria, also known as Jacob's Ladder, and the variety is Heaven Sent. The flowers actually have a sweet fragrance, and they're lavender in color, bell-shaped blooms. I can actually show you right here. The foliage is fern-like, so even when it's not in bloom, it has a really interesting foliage. I have mine planted in my woodland garden, which is a part sun, part shade location. It's mostly shady. Gets a little bit of morning sun, which is what this plant would prefer. Even though it says full sun, I feel like morning sun would be best. Maybe about 4 hours of morning sun. And it is $15.98 for the 1 gallon container. They get to be 18 to 24 inches in height when they have their blooms on them, and they need 15 to 18 inch spacing. Hardy in zones 3 through 7 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And they bloom in late spring. These would look really great mixed in with other ferns, caryxes, and coral bells. In fact, I sat it right beside some red foliage coral bell, and you can see how beautiful that contrast is. These coral bells or heucheras are by Monrovia. They're called the electric plum coral bell. It says part sun to shade. Now, heucheras in general, they do a lot better in more shade. So if you are going to give it some sun, just a couple of hours of morning sun would be sufficient. Otherwise, they can start to crisp up a little and the leaves will look a little unsightly. And it is a perennial, which means it comes back year after year if it's happy in your garden. It is deer resistant, and I do find that to be the case in my garden. It says here light 1 to 3 hours of morning sun because morning sun is more gentle, and it likes a semi-moist but well-draining soil. Gets to be 8 to 10 inches in height and 16 to 18 inches in width, and blooms spring and summer, hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And it would actually look really pretty also paired with some hosta. Look at that, because they have different texture and foliage. And my Lowe's currently has a sale on their 1 pint annuals, 5 for $10. Now keep in mind that sales and availability will vary by location, but check out your Lowe's if you're looking to add some annuals. So they have some petunias in shades of pink, white, and purple, and they also have some marigolds in some orange colors and in yellow. These are, I believe, African marigolds. No, they're the French marigold, but the African marigolds look very similar with that large pom-pom bloom. And these are usually the ones that I associate with being the French marigolds, the tinier ones. Yep, these are dwarf variety. So $2 each, not a bad price. And the quart-sized proven winners annuals have arrived, and they usually have quite a good selection here at Lowe's. A lot of the really popular varieties like the Super Petunia Bubblegum. They have the Mini Vista line. So this is the Super Petunia Mini Vista Hot Pink, and the Snowdrift, which is also pretty popular. It's a really pretty white petunia, and this is the Super Petunia Vista Snowdrift. I grew the Vista Scarlet a couple of seasons ago. It was kind of like a reddish color. It was beautiful. One small quart container like this filled out a 10-inch pot for me in no time. It was a very vigorous grower. So if you're looking for some proven winners annuals, Lowe's does carry them, $5.98 here at my Lowe's. And some woodland phlox. Now this is a phlox that likes a part shade location. So if you have a shadier garden and you want to enjoy some of these really pretty blooms, this is a good option. It comes in purple, and I've also seen white. But the best thing about this woodland phlox is that it is fragrant. It has such a lovely floral scent. This one here still has tons of buds. So if you bring these home, you'll get to enjoy them for a little bit longer in your garden. Now phlox comes in so many varieties. There is the creeping phlox that's more of a ground cover that blooms in early spring. Then there are the taller garden phloxes that bloom in summer, and those typically like sun, even though the creeping phlox can take a little bit less sun. But this woodland phlox likes only a little bit of morning sun, so 3 to 6 hours of morning sun. And it says it's a mounding perennial, which means it comes back year after year. It is hardy to a zone 4, so very hardy, down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and it gets to be 12 inches in height and 18 inches in width. And some hens and chicks, also known as sempervivum. These are excellent succulent type plants. They work great in the landscape if you have like a rock garden or even in a container. I actually have some planted in a low terracotta bowl, and I love the way they look. And they spread over time. They send out little babies, and then you get a bunch more that you can either put out in the garden, share with friends, or create other containers with them. And they also come in different colors and patterns. So this one here is the Ruby Heart Hens and Chicks, and these are $8.98 in the Lowe's brand containers. These love full sun, so any sedum is going to want a well-draining soil and full sun. And it is hardy, very hardy. Sedums are also really hardy, down to a zone 3 or negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. It gets to be 4 inches in height, 6 inches in width, and that is the Ruby Hearts. And then they also have this really pretty one here, which is green with the burgundy tips. And this variety is called the Black Hens and Chicks. And it also probably stays relatively low. Yep, 6 inches in height, 6 inches in width. Hardiness the same, down to a zone 3 or negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And then I found this other variety at the bottom. Look how cool that is. Isn't that gorgeous? Now imagine this in a low planter that you can really see all of this really pretty foliage. I think it looks great. And this one is called Pacific Blue Ice Hens and Chicks. And it gets 3 to 4 inches in height, 6 to 8 inches in width. That's a real pretty one. And speaking of sedums, this is another perennial that I feel every garden should have, especially if you have full sun. And this is a really popular variety. It is the Autumn Joy Sedum. Now these will bloom in late summer into fall, but even when you just see the foliage poking through the soil, it's a really beautiful plant. They have these really thick stems that hold on to a lot of water, so they are very drought tolerant. So they don't need a lot of water. They want a very well-draining soil and full sun in order for them to do best. Now, whenever you see plants that like full sun split in the center, sedum is one that is notorious for that. It's because they're not getting enough sun. They also don't want fertilizer, so don't fertilize these. They will be a lot happier. $5.48 for these. They're the Lowe's quart-size perennial containers. It's an upright perennial, and it gets to be 18 to 24 inches in height and 18 to 24 inches in width. Very hardy, down to a zone 3 or negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, did you know that it's also really easy to get additional sedum plants? If you go home and you plant this plant and say one of these stems snaps off, it looks like this one is already snapped off. Let's see. No, it's not. It's just hanging there. But say a stem breaks off. All you have to do is stick it in the soil. It will start growing roots within a few weeks, and then you have a whole other plant. So super easy to get a lot more sedum to spread around your garden. Another really pretty perennial, Dianthus. They look like little carnations, and this is a real pretty one in this salmon pink color. It's a Proven Winners 2-quart container for $12.98, and the variety is Fruit Punch Classic Coral. It likes part sun to sun and hardy in zones 4 through 9, and it needs 12 to 14 inch spacing, and it gets to be 8 to 10 inches in height. Blooms early summer. And check out this really vibrant Dianthus. It's like a hot pink fuchsia color. It's called Neon Star, and it's in the Lowe's quart size container for $5.48. So that's a great price because it makes it more affordable to buy drifts of plants. So buying in odd numbers, 3 plants, 5, 7, etc. And they're also a lot easier to plant because they have a small root ball. So this Neon Star Dianthus is also a really compact plant at only 6 to 8 inches in height and in width, and they like full sun. Most Dianthus will bloom in spring until very early summer, and then if you deadhead them, so just shear the plant down to this tuft of grassy foliage, they will usually reflush out with a secondary set of blooms. But a really pretty perennial. And check out these gorgeous Calla lilies. Isn't that beautiful? It's like a burgundy with a hint of mauve, really pretty. Now these are Proven Winners, and they are labeled as an annual, and here in my zone 6B 7A they should be treated as an annual. However, I have some gardening friends who have actually planted these in a more protected location, like a microclimate against the foundation of their home on the south side of the home, where they're protected from wind and really cold, harsh weather, and they've come back for them as perennial for a few years, so you never know. But these are gorgeous. They're called Be My Destiny. They are listed as an annual for part sun to sun, $14.98 for this 2-quart size container, but a really beautiful bloom color. I also found some yellow ones, and I noticed that the foliage is speckled on these as well, so that's also interesting. It looks like the yellow variety up top has a little bit more speckling on the foliage versus this burgundy one, but this is really pretty. Look at them. Let me know if you've had luck with Calla lilies returning in your garden. And here is another shade foliage plant that I've talked about a bit on my channel because I really love it. Now, heucheras in general don't do the best for me planted in the garden. They do better in planters, in pots for me anyway. But this variety does really well for me in the landscape, and it's one of the first heucheras that I bought. It's the Caramel, and it is by Monrovia. And it says full sun and shade. I would not put these in full sun. If anything, I'd give them maybe a couple of hours of morning sun. Otherwise, the foliage will start to crisp up. They like a moist but well-draining soil. It is a perennial. I find in my garden that deer and rabbit don't touch it. And it even says here, light 1 to 3 hours of morning sun. A semi-moist soil, and it gets to be 10 to 14 inches in height, 14 to 16 inches in width. Blooms in spring and summer, and hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. So heuchera also blooms. It will send up these stalks of flowers that look like baby's breath. The pollinators really like them, but if you don't like them, again, like Hosta, you can just follow that stem down, cut it off, and just leave the tuft of foliage. Someone recently said to me when I said this was one of my favorites that it reminds them of fall leaves. They do, and I actually really like fall, so I don't mind it. But in a shady garden, having a combination of different foliage colors, like this color Caramel heuchera, a red or burgundy foliage heuchera, even mixed in with something like this, a foam flower or Tiarella, it looks really beautiful, and it's a great way to add color to a shady garden. And this really bright foliage plant is actually a heucherella. So it is a cross between a heuchera and a Tiarella. And you see this red veining that it has? This would look beautifully paired with something like a burgundy or red foliage heuchera, because it would pull on the center veining of this plant and look like a really nice combination. So this here likes shade, 1 to 3 hours of morning sun only. It's a mounding perennial. It's called the Catching Fire foam flower. These also bloom, and foam flowers usually get these kind of like plume blooms that are really pretty. Light colors, like a light peachy color, an ivory color is what I've seen them in. So let's see how big these get. They're usually pretty compact, so 8 to 10 inches in height, 16 to 20 inches in width, and it is hardy to a zone 4 or -20 degrees Fahrenheit. And a really pretty blooming perennial for a shadier garden, Columbine, also known as Aquilegia. These do really well with anywhere from 3 to 6 hours of morning sun per day, and they also have really pretty foliage. So not only is the bloom interesting, has these spikes on the back, the pollinators love it. And this is a Monrovia quart-size container for $5.98. It likes part sun, the Kirigami deep blue and white Columbine. They also come in shades of pink, like rose colors that we've looked at recently. And they are low water once established, 18 to 24 inches in height, 18 to 24 inches in width. They bloom spring and summer and hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you know that I love mandevilla, and they always come in shades of pink and red. But look at this color that I just spotted today down below. A buttery yellow. Isn't that gorgeous? So pretty. Now these are tropical annuals. They love heat, so they are very drought tolerant. They love the sun, and I can sometimes even go a day between waterings, which is excellent. But this is a really beautiful shade of yellow. I'm totally in love with this plant. So these quart-sized containers of the Tropical Escape Mandevilla are $6.98, and I am gonna go ahead and pick up 2 for myself before they sell out. I can't plant these yet because our weather is still pretty unpredictable, but I'm gonna keep them in a protected spot so that I can plant them out in a planter and enjoy them this season. Now, if you're someone who doesn't like to create your own container combinations, maybe it stresses you out, these ready fill containers are a great option. So they have several different mixes. This one happens to be a geranium. It has a few geranium plants in it with a Dracaena spike in the center, and they are ready to just drop into your container. So it tells you this is the medium size ready fill, and it fits an 11.7 decorative pottery or planter. So you would just take this and drop it into your maybe 12-inch planter, and you are good to go. Just water them. I found another really pretty super petunia in the quart size Proven Winners containers. This is called Black Cherry. So if you are into trying that Gothic garden trend, the dark moody flowers, this is a good one to dip your toes into, this annual. I actually picked up a couple of lily bulbs to try out these dark colors. I picked up a Landini and a Black Charm, but this is a really pretty petunia. They also have black petunias. I'm not sure that they're not by Proven Winners, but this is a really great option as well, this Black Cherry. It's a very pretty one. Little tip that I'll share with you about these small quart-sized containers. Some people will think that because they're small like this, you need to buy 2 or 3 to put in, say, a 15 to 18-inch planter, but really 1 or 2 will do it because they are such vigorous growers. So they will get pretty large throughout the course of a season. So this one says that it gets to be 4 to 12 inches in height and spacing 12 to 24 inches. Now, some of them spread more than others, but if this spreads to the 24 inches that it says, especially if you fertilize every week or every other week, they will get quite large. So you usually need a little bit less than you think you do to fill out those containers. I just found the cutest lilac. Look at this bloom. It is purple, but it has a white margin. Is that not beautiful? I've never seen this before. Or if I have come across the shrub, it hasn't been in bloom, and I've never seen the flower, which is super interesting. Now, lilacs are another quintessential spring blooming shrub. They are beautiful. Did you know that back in the olden days, in the Victorian era, they used to plant lilac shrubs all around the outhouses to sort of mask any fragrances? I thought that was really interesting. This variety is the Sensation Lilac. It is a flowering shrub, $34.98 for these in the Lowe's house brand container. They like full sun. Any kind of flowering shrub, with the exception of some hydrangeas, are going to want a lot of sun. And it gets to be 10 feet in height, 6 feet in width, and it is hardy to zone 3, so very hardy, down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. I do find that these are deer resistant in my garden, probably because they're fragrant. They tend to stay away from them, but this bloom is gorgeous. And hydrangeas. These are the endless summer hydrangeas. And most of the macrophylla type hydrangeas will bloom on old wood, which means you have to be really careful about pruning them. Well, the endless summer hydrangeas have been bred to bloom on old wood and new wood. So even if your blooms get zapped by a late spring frost, or if you prune them incorrectly, you'll still get flowers. And this variety is the Bloomstruck, which is a really good one. Not only does it have these dark stems, which add another layer of interest on the shrub, but it's also a rebloomer. So here it is, Bloomstruck Reblooming Hydrangea. It gets to be 3 to 4 feet in height, 4 to 5 feet in width, and it is hardy in zones 4 through 9. And it wants only morning sun, about 4 or 5 hours of morning, so between 4 and 6, you'll be good. And it has a rounded shape. Now, I find that deer do like to munch on the blooms, so you would have to spray them with a repellent to protect them. And they also like a soil that is moist but well draining. Hydra means hydrangeas, hydra water, right? And the other thing is that the color on these blooms will be dependent upon the acidity in your soil. So if you have a more acidic soil, they will lean more blue, and if you have a more alkaline soil, they will lean more pink purple. So if you've ever wondered why your hydrangeas that you thought were going to be blue aren't, it has to do with the soil. The Bloomstruck hydrangea is in a 3-gallon container for $37.98. You can add things like a soil acidifier that will eventually turn your hydrangea blue, but you'll have to apply this over a couple of seasons so that it starts to build in that soil before you start seeing any color changing happening. This is the Espoma soil acidifier. It says that it lowers your soil pH. It says right here, safer than aluminum sulfate. You can use this for blueberries and hydrangeas, and they are $19.77 for a 6-pound bag here at Lowe's. And on the flip side, if you want hydrangeas that look more pink, you can use the garden lime. And this one says right there, turns hydrangeas pink. Again, it will have to be over several applications before you start noticing any color changes. And it's a pelletized granular type fertilizer, and it raises your soil's pH. And the garden lime is $11.48 for it looks like a 5-pound bag. And the original Bloomstruck hydrangea, this is the first one that they came out with that blooms on old and new wood. It's the traditional style macrophylla or mop head type hydrangea with these big leaves and large blooms. It says the original big bold blooms. It's also a rebloomer, and this one grows to be 3 to 5 feet in height, 3 to 5 feet in width, and it is hardy in zones 4 through 9. It prefers morning sun and afternoon shade. And it is also in a 3-gallon container for $37.98. And say you didn't want a 3-gallon container because they're too large, or you just want to try them out, so you want to start with something smaller. They also have these 1-gallon sizes for $19.98, which is a really great price point. And they have both the Bloomstruck and the original available here. Now, when we were here at Lowe's a couple of weeks ago, they had their ferns, their Boston ferns, and the hanging baskets on sale 2 for $20, so $10 each. I actually came back and picked up a couple because it was a really good price. But the Boston ferns have more of an arching habit and are better for shade. And these here are the Kimberly Queen ferns, which have more of an upright habit and can tolerate sun. So if you like the look of ferns, but you have a sunnier spot to put them, this is a great option. So $19.98 for these containers of Kimberly Queen ferns. It says part sun, so if you are going to give it sun, a morning sun would be best. And look at this other really cool fern. This is called the macho fern. Look at that. The fronds are huge. See that? Let me pull this away for you to see the size. That is massive. Really interesting. It looks like the macho fern also wants shade. It says performs best in a shaded location, water consistently moist, and non-hardy below 40 degrees because it is a tropical. $35.98 for these. Some more annual hanging baskets, and they have some geraniums as well as some snapdragons, and it looks like some lobelia. That's a really pretty one with some blue and some white lobelia. Lobelia I find does better in a part shade, part sun location. They also like a moist but well-draining soil, and that way you can keep them going a little bit longer. If they're in full sun, hot sun, they sometimes will fizzle out pretty early on in the season. So $22.98 for these mounding annual hanging baskets. They also have some impatient hanging baskets. These are great for shade in that salmon pink, this light pink, and these are $12.98 for their 1.5-gallon containers. When I do these videos here at Lowe's or at the Home Depot and I talk about plants being resistant to deer or rabbit and whether or not I have to spray things, this is one of the more common deer repellents that I actually use in my garden. It is the liquid fence deer and rabbit. I usually purchase this large one here that is a ready to use. It's just shake it and spray it, so it makes it really easy, and they're $24.98 for this 1-gallon container. In my last Lowe's video, we went over quite a few of these really beautiful Monrovia shrubs that they have here in stock at Lowe's. And I actually picked up this rhododendron here because it had a really interesting bloom color I had never seen before. A really pretty yellow. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? It is a part sun shrub. Rhododendrons in general are understory shrubs. They like to be planted under the shade or canopy of larger trees. It has spring blooms. It likes a woodland garden setting, $49.98 for this size container. And it likes soil that is moist but well draining, blooms in spring, hardy in zones 6 through 9 or down to -10 degrees Fahrenheit. And it only gets to be about 3 or so feet in height and in width. So I was really excited to pick this up. I did plant it in one of my more recent videos if you want to go ahead and check that out. And I also went through quite a few of these really beautiful Monrovia plants in my last video that you can also take a look at if you're interested. This is a shrub that I've talked about before that I absolutely love. I actually have it in my garden. It is a willow. This is the Iceberg Alley Sage Leaf Willow by First Editions. Look at that. This is what the foliage looks like. It literally looks like the herb sage, but it is a shrub and it loves a moist soil. So if you have a problem spot in your garden that stays pretty wet, this will do excellent. I have 3 of them planted in a grouping and they've done really well in an area that stays pretty wet a lot of the times when we get a lot of spring rain, etc. They get to be 3 to 6 feet in height, 3 to 6 feet in width, and they're hardy in zones 2 through 6. And currently it has its blooms on it. And now willows, just like the pussy willow, etc., they get these little catkins and they're actually in bloom. You can see what they look like right now. And then once they're done blooming, this foliage will get a lot larger and it has a really pretty kind of silvery blue coloring. Very pretty shrub. And these are in a 2-gallon container for $27.98. And another really pretty Proven Winners Super Petunia. This is the Saffron Finch, which is a really pretty yellow. $5.98 for the quart size container. And some begonia hanging baskets. I have absolutely fallen in love with begonias over the last couple of seasons. Look at these gorgeous leaves. And they have these dainty little blooms in shades of pink and white and red. Now they also have the begonias with the green foliage, but I actually really like the ones with the red foliage. Really pretty. These are the 1.5-gallon hanging basket containers for $12.98. Well, here's what I picked up today. 2 of that buttery yellow mandevilla. I also grabbed 3 of these really pretty catching fire foam flowers. I think that's going to look really gorgeous in my Japanese maple garden. And I could not resist. I did get another rhododendron. So let me share the variety with you. This is the Percy Wiseman rhododendron. It was $17.98. If you Google this, it has the most beautiful coloration. It goes almost like a pink to a peach color. It wants 3 to 6 hours of morning sun per day, gets to be 6 feet in height, 6 feet in width, hardy to a zone 5. Really beautiful, and it still has lots of buds. So when I plant it, I'm going to make sure to spray them so that the deer don't eat them and I get to enjoy them. Well, that brings us to the end of April inventory here at Lowe's. I hope that you've enjoyed checking out what my store has in stock, and I hope that you can find some of these varieties near you. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one.